Ridgewood Savings Bank is proud and pleased to participate in this memorialization of the history of St. John's basketball. As an alumnus of the university who knows firsthand the positive impact of St. John's in the metropolitan area, I'm all the more delighted. We at Ridgewood wish St. John's continued success on the basketball courts and, more importantly, in its larger role of providing top-quality education to young men and women.
People are from here. We don't come from all over the country. There's some like a homespun philosophy, that feeling. Like the kids always come back here. Why? Because they lived here. They don't have to travel a day or two. They're right here. So when you walk out into the street, you meet players, former your fans. There's a great basketball tradition here, an atmosphere that's unique. Because probably it is our game that we love so much, the city game.
I thought it was a privilege for me to be playing for them. You know, it wasn't like I chose St. John's, what are you going to do for me? I was like, thank you for having me. This is a prestigious school with one of the most prestigious coaches. It was a privilege for me to play for them, and that's how I treated it.
You know, they gave me an opportunity to get an education. They gave me an opportunity to play, you know, in Madison Square Garden. But more than that, they taught you how to be a man.
Through high school, I always had followed the St. John's teams, knew a lot of the families that had played here, and it was always a good quality situation that one day you hoped you could be a part of.
St. John's epitomized great college basketball in our area. Every kid knew their players growing up, and you hope someday that you could play like one of their players.
I think we were able to excel because of the wonderful, outstanding people that we had in the program. And by that I mean the coaches, the players, and the administrators.
The people who knew basketball always recognized St. John's because in the great history of this game, if you think of all the schools we have, we are number 4 in a number of victories, up there with Kansas, Kentucky, and North Carolina. That's a marvelous record for a little school used to be in Brooklyn, started by the Goodman Sensen fathers.
Alumni Hall here on the Queens campus of St. John's University may be considered small by the standard of today's colossal college arenas, but there's nothing small about the program that has called this field house home for over 30 years. Since its humble beginnings back in 1907, St. John's basketball has grown into one of the true big-time programs. Whether headquartered at Old DeGray Gym, here at Alumni Hall, or at its second home, Madison Square Garden, winning seasons at St. John's have become almost second nature. Playing the best competition available, the team has prospered year in and year out. This is the story of that success.
The winning St. John's tradition began with a loss. On December 6, 1907, Father John Chestnut sent his new club to play its first-round ball battle, but NYU handed the Johnnies a 34-13 lesson. Things could only get better. Just a few weeks later, St. John's got its first win, an 18-17 thriller over Delphi, and there would be far more wins than losses in the years to come. The early St. John's teams were quick studies in this new discipline called basketball. It was only a few years before the Brooklyn Vincentians rose to the top of the fledgling basketball world. By the spring of 1911, everyone who'd heard of basketball had also heard of the upstart Johnnies and their All-American floor leader, John Keenan. Keenan got things started in a hurry with a 25-point outburst in the season opener against Cathedral, an unheard-of total in his day. The team barreled through the 14-game schedule with hardly a scare, and long before there were any tournaments to make it official, the Brooklyn Vincentians were tabbed National Collegiate Basketball Champions by the Helms Athletic Foundation. Through World War I and the Roaring '20s, St. John's fielded some of the hardest-working squads in the game. John Crenny guided the Johnnies to 9 hard-nosed years and a solid 105-86 record. His blue-collar teams laid the foundation for flashier clubs to come by barnstorming across the East Coast, playing anyone who was willing and able. Because the football team wore red uniforms, it was during this era that St. John's teams became known as the Big Red Team, and eventually just the Redmen. After a while, Chief Blackjack came to symbolize the program. In 1927, Crenny passed the torch to James Buck Freeman. Fresh off his brilliant 4-year career as a multi-sport St. John's student-athlete, Redmen basketball and the game itself would never be the same. The greatest of Buck's many great teams was known as the Wonder Five, and their exploits are legendary. Matty Begovich, Al Shuckman, Rip Gerson, Max Posnack, and Mac Kinsbrunner joined forces in the fall of 1929. They went 23-1 that year. Not bad for a bunch of newcomers. But St. John's original Fab Five really came of age during the 1930-31 season when they marched off a 21-1 record, losing only to NYU.
See, you didn't throw the ball up that often because it just wasn't in the cards then. You worked to get your key man open. And I just think these guys fell together at St. John's down there in Lewis Avenue and Hart Street, and the little tiny gym they played in, and they just melded together.
The Wonder Five also helped begin one of the game's best traditions, college basketball at Madison Square Garden. On January 19, 1931, a Garden throng saw the great Redmen squad put on a clinic, beating CCNY 17-9. The final score was generous. City College didn't manage a field goal until the last minute.
I think Buck Freeman has never been given the credit for the effect he had on basketball. So adept was his team at St. John's, the Wonder Five, and before and thereafter. He only coached 9 years, at St. John's. But his team's abilities to execute his offenses, that is holding the ball, bringing it up over the 10-second line, it wasn't a 10-second line then, going in for a score and coming around. A 4-point lead was a big lead to the Wonder Five, and you couldn't get the ball back off them.
The Wonder Five was special, but they weren't the end of the terrific teams under Buck Freeman. The 1931-32 St. John's squad posted a 22-4 finish. One highlight was a 35-21 victory over Chicago's DePaul Blue Demons, the first in a long line of big-time intersectional games. The 1932-33 team played to record crowds in the rebuilt DeGray Gym. They christened their new home by trouncing St. John's of Maryland 34-10. It was the first of 23 wins against just 4 losses. By the following season, the demand for seats at DeGray was overwhelming.
DeGray was the gym that Ned Irish, as a sports writer, was covering a game between St. John's and Long Island University, and somehow he couldn't get in the front door because of the crowd, so a manager, I guess, brought him around. He got in through a window on the side and shinnied down to the seats. In so doing, he always said, I tore my best pair of pants. And he said, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to look about improving basketball where people can walk in and not tear their pants seeing a game. And so he came to Madison Square Garden. And that's one of the biggest things that has ever happened to basketball.
Starting in 1934, Irish's Madison Square Garden doubleheaders, usually featuring St. John's, put college basketball on the map. Buck Freeman closed out his career in 1936 with an 18-4 record. Over 9 seasons, his teams had won 177 times in 208 tries. Freeman's successor was a former star on the original Celtics named Joe Lapchick.
When he was tapped by Father Rebholz and Walter McLaughlin to coach the St. John's team back in 1936, he said, what do you want me for? I'm a professional player. He said, I can't even tell you I left high school. I didn't go to high school. I went to the 6th grade. He said, what can I tell college players? You'll be all right. So he tells a story on himself that the first couple of days of practice down in Old DeGray, he pulled out the stands and climbed to the top of the stands and talked there because he heard somebody say a coach should always talk down to his college players.
He would sit up there and he would have the 2 captains choose sides, and then they would scrimmage. And every now and then he may say something, but Joe did not have great confidence in himself when he began to coach. As he, got further into it, then he developed a lot of confidence, and he was, as it turned out, he was just a great coach and a great human being.
The Yonkers native led his first team to 7 wins in its first 7 games. The next years were better still. The Redmen received a bid to the inaugural National Invitation Tournament at the end of the 1938-39 season. Bill Lloyd's 31 points sparked St. John's to a 71-47 win over Roanoke in the quarterfinals. And though the Redmen fell in the semis, Lloyd was still voted most valuable player for the tournament. St. John's had fielded plenty of great teams in the past, but with postseason tournaments producing clear champions in the early 40s, St. John's established itself among the college basketball elite. Harry Boykoff was one big reason for the team's success in 1943. At 6'9", the giant Johnny notched 399 points in his first season, including an MSG record 45 points in one incredible effort versus St. Joseph's. With tiny High Gotkins setting up Boykoff, Andy Fuzzy Levain, and Larry Baxter, the Redmen rolled through an 18-2 regular season, and they capped off the year by winning the school's first National Invitation Tournament title. After the thrill of a championship season, the 1943-44 campaign looked like it would have letdown written all over it. Graduation and the military draft decimated Lapchick's squad. The magnificent Boykoff was gone, along with just about everyone else, except High Gotkin and a few reserves. But destiny was on their side. And they had a kid named Dick McGuire.
Well, I think he was very quick. He played good defense, and he could see the whole court. He knew where the other 4 players were. He could always see the open man, and again, to use the expression, he could thread a needle.
I never touched a basketball until I was a senior in high school, so I got very lucky. I don't know why. They gave me a scholarship there, and I was lucky to get. Father Brown gave me a scholarship, and I was very happy to find a school to take me.
McGuire teamed with Gotkin to lead St. John's to a 15-5 regular season finish, good enough for a spot in the NIT field. But when McGuire left the team for the military before the tournament, no one gave the Redmen a chance. The ragtag Johnnies proved everyone wrong, with Bill Katsouris providing the spark. First, they knocked off Bowling Green and the 7-foot Don Otten, 44-40. Then they beat Adolph Rupp's Kentucky Wildcats, 48-45. And finally, they found themselves in the NIT final, this time against DePaul. But game plans were thrown out the window when Coach Lapchick fainted in the second half.
When he did faint, we were 4 points down. And he said, when I got my wits back about me, he said, and I knew where I was and what I was doing, we were 3 points up. So he said, I guess I dealt strategy one hell of a blow.
After the Big Chief came to, the Johnnies wrapped up their second straight NIT championship. When the war ended, a lot of great players returned to St. John's, including Dick McGuire and Harry Boykoff, who became St. John's first consensus All-American and the first player in school history to score 1,000 points. On March 11, 1947, Boykoff scored 54 points against St. Francis. And everybody at St. John's was into basketball.
Even back at that time, you could see how basketball was a great tradition. During the lunch hour, we'd have intramural games, and everybody congregated after these games in the cafeteria. Professors, the good Vincentian fathers. It was just a marvelous feeling, but you could really feel how important basketball was to St. John's.
Boykoff's final season with the Johnnies was also the last for Joe Lapchick, at least for a while. The Big Chief took his talents to the New York Knickerbockers, and a former Johnny Letterman named Frank McGuire took over.
Frank McGuire was very close to his players. And I think each of the individuals on the team thought that Frank was his father. You know, that's the kind of guy he was.
Well, he's a handsome man. I mean, I think most mothers fell in love with him, and that's why he did very good job of recruiting players. He was if you ever get to know him, he just had a very nice way about him, and you had to like him.
Coach could have been mayor of New York. And if you saw that big, smiling Irishman, he too was so fortunate to have been associated with the coach.
McGuire jumped right in, but the Redmen had lost a lot of their top players.
He faced the season grimly with a lot of new players and him as a new coach. And that first year was a 12-11 year. It was an up and a down year with some of the most horrendous defeats I've ever seen, with one exception. We beat City College, 38-34. And it was a gas, as Frank Sinatra would say. City College in those years, they were good. Why do we want to, somebody said, why do you want to beat City College? Because they were good.
St. John's fortunes changed in the fall of 1948 with the arrival of another McGuire. Al joined his brother Dick on the varsity.
It was fun playing with Al. He's my brother. We get along very, very well, and hey, it was nice to play a couple of years with him.
They finished 15-9 that year and looked ready to do even better the next year. At the end of the 49-50 season, rookie Bob Zawalik poured in 65 points against St. Peter's to set the school's single-game scoring record. The Redmen earned third-place finishes in both the NIT and the NCAA tournament that year and posted a strong 26-5 final record. The next year, St. John's added Jack McMahon and Solly Walker, the first black player at the school.
I was told, by friends and family that I was going to a situation where it was not going to be pleasant. And, I learned to accept a lot of things, but the experience, taught me to believe in who I was, not what people thought I was.
The Redmen turned the 51-52 campaign into one of the greatest in school history. St. John's was blasted by Kentucky, but lost only 2 other games and entered the NIT as a #1 seed. They bowed out of NIT contention quickly, but outlasted NC State in the first round of the NCAA tournament. That set up a rematch with Kentucky in the East Regional Final, and this time Zawalik scored 32, and the Redmen shocked the Wildcats 64-57 in one of the great upsets the game has ever seen. St. John's went to Seattle for the Final Four, and the Redmen knocked off Illinois in the semifinals 61-59. St. John's was going to play for the national championship, but Clyde Lavellet's Kansas Jayhawks were too much for the Redmen. The final was 80-63.
Lavelle was just too big, and we tried to move back on him, to double up on him, but I think they had a guy named Knotzman in the corner doing them one-handers. So if we fall back, they hit the one-handers. We play We play up tight on the corner people. Lavella will kill us inside. But we're competitive. We tried until the last minute, but it was just too big.
The near-perfect campaign was Frank McGuire's last at St. John's. He left for North Carolina with 102 wins against just 36 losses in his 5 spectacular seasons. Longtime assistant Al Dusty DiStefano assumed the vacant job and inherited the challenge of a lifetime. His first team would have to do without any of the previous year's stars. DiStefano would have to start from scratch. Things looked bleak when the Redmen dropped 4 of their first 7 games, but they weren't quite ready to throw in the towel. They lost only once more all season. And the unlikely roll continued right into the National Invitation Tournament. First, the Redmen outlasted St. Louis. Then they shocked tourney favorite LaSalle. Then they dumped Duquesne in the semifinals. But Seton Hall had won 26 in a row that year, and their 27th would give them the crown. The Johnnies simply couldn't stop one team on a bigger roll than them. Once again, St. John's finished the season in the nation's top 10, where it had been ranked for the last 4 years. When DiStefano stepped down in 1956, the call went out to Joe Lapchick, who decided it was time to return to St. John's. Shortly after Lapchick's return, a rich chapter in St. John's basketball history came to an end. On December 8, 1956, the Redmen closed the DeGray Gym era with an exclamation point, drilling Roanoke 103-65. It was the 156th victory inside that cramped but hallowed hall against only 11 losses. At the end of the 58-59 season, St. John's again found itself in the NIT Finals. With Tony Jackson hauling down a school record 27 rebounds, St. John's eked out a 76-71 double overtime win over Bradley to garner its 3rd NIT crown. In what many will tell you was the most thrilling final the tourney has ever seen, St. John's fought from behind in regulation, in the first overtime, and in the second overtime as well to get the win.
They closed the doors of the DeGray Gym for good back in '56, and for the next 5 years, the Redmen were really a team without a true home court. After entertaining visiting teams at the Garden, Fordham, even Martin Van Buren High School, their wandering days were finally over with the opening of Alumni Hall. December 6, 1961 was the date. Joe Lapchick's Redmen began the alumni era with a 79-65 romp of GW. And ever since, St. John's has been a tough act to beat at home.
The 1961-62 season belonged to Leroy Ellis, the long, tall center who averaged more than 24 points a game. Ellis led his team to an unbeaten record in the new Alumni Hall and yet another berth in the NIT. After downing Holy Cross and Duquesne, Dayton awaited in the finals. The Flyers had reached the championship game 3 times before. The 4th would be the charm. St. John's fell 75-67. Joe Lapchick announced he would retire for good at the end of the 64-65 campaign. Ken and Bob McIntyre and Lloyd Sonny Dubb were the heart of his final squad, and they played as if their lives depended on sending the Big Chief out in style. First, they shocked Cassie Russell's #1 Michigan Wolverines in the ECAC Holiday Festival in January. And when the bid arrived for that old familiar NIT, the Johnnies were raring to go. The great old coach scrapped his conservative game plan and let the Redmen run free. They beat Bob Cousy's Boston College Eagles and New Mexico, and then they knocked off Bobby Knight's Army Cadets in the semifinal. For the title match against Villanova, the Big Indian ordered his Chargers to drop back into the stalking jungle defense. He had made his trademark. The result was a 55-51 victory.
As we picked Joe up and lugged him off the court, he said, "What a hell of a way to go." And it was a great way to go.
Joe Lapchick was a great human being. I mean, I think an overworked word is great, but Joe Lapchick was a great human being, and he made everyone feel good about themselves. Was Joe Lapchick a great X and O coach? I think that would be open to question. But when he coached his teams, he could get 5 guys to go through the wall for him. And that's why that was his greatest asset, that you never wanted to disappoint him. And guys would give not 100% effort, but they would give 200% effort for Lapchick.
In 20 years at St. John's, Lapchick's teams had won 334 games and 4 NIT titles. It would not soon be forgotten. Filling Joe Lapchick's shoes seemed like an impossible task, but a longtime assistant named Lou Carnesecca would take his best shot.
But I think what really helped that I had been here so long, so it wasn't like some young guy come from the outside and stepping in. I knew the school, I knew the situation, I knew the system, knew the players, knew the makeup, something aside from basketball, but the academic part. So it was a big plus. An outsider coming in can be difficult because St. John's is unique. We don't have the great dormitories. We're a commuter school. We're a working class school. 70% of our kids, after they finish class, go to work. Okay, so it's a little different. But the tradition of basketball has always been here. It's something that we can put our mitts into.
Carnesecca's first season at the controls wasn't half bad, with Sonny Dove emerging as Louis's first go-to guy. The season opened against Georgetown.
Down at Georgetown, that same Georgetown that's caused us a lot of problems the past years. And, you know, we have a little ritual at St. John's. Before the game starts, we'll put our hands together. We'll say a little prayer like Our Lady of Victory, pray for us. I was so shook up, I was so nervous, that instead of saying Our Lady, pray for us, I started to say, oh my God, I'm oddly sorry. Thank God Bobby Mack hits a jump shot in the overtime. We went on, of course. That was the start of it.
For the next 3 years, Louis's lads were giant killers, knocking off some of the nation's best and appearing in the NCAA tournament to cap each season. But the 1968-69 season will be forever remembered as the run of Carnesecca's Cardiac Kids, so dubbed by the New York sports pages for their last-second heroics. Win or lose, the team with guys like Carmine Calzanetti and John Warren tested Louis's ticker on more occasions than the coach would care to remember.
But those Cardiac Kids of the late 60s that Louis had, they really, you know, they defied description. They pulled victories out when they weren't there.
At the close of that season, Carnesecca announced he would leave St. John's to coach the New York Nets. Louis agreed to stay 1 more year with the Redmen, though, and it turned out to be a great one. In the 1970 NIT, St. John's beat Miami of Ohio, slid past Georgia Tech by 1, then ousted Army with a pair of Richie Lyons free throws after the buzzer. But Al McGuire and his Marquette Warriors came back to sting his alma mater in the final. Louis was deprived of a final victory. Former Johnny Frank Molzoff took over the following year. Led by the high-flying Mel Davis, Molzoff's inaugural team posted the school's 1,000th victory.
His situation was that he had coached high school level prior to coming here. We had good talent, and our varsity years, I believe, I think those 3 years we had 19-5, 19-6 records. So we had a very successful 3 years under Molzoff, and we had a good display of talent on the floor most of the time playing under Coach Molzoff. A little different style, a little bit more of run and gun, which suited my causes more than Coach Carnesecca, but we were fairly successful with that approach.
Big Mel Davis powered St. John's into the NIT in March of 1972. His 10-minute flurry helped bury Oral Roberts' 26-game winning streak in the semifinals. But a knee injury took him out of that game and ended his career at St. John's.
But what I liked about Mel Davis and about several of our other players, when they left here under the 4 years time that of playing, they did not attain a degree, but they came back. Mel Davis came back and got his degree and is in the world of business today and is a success. That I think about more than anything else. But I cannot put out of my mind those 10 minutes against Oral Roberts. back there in 1972. He was super, super. No St. John's player ever hit that peak.
Billy Schaefer came on the scene in a big way in fall of 1972. His 104 points led the Redmen to the Holiday Festival title that year.
We had played very well our first couple of games in the tournament. Then we had to play Michigan University in the semifinals. And I remember it very well. We had basically won the game by a couple of points. We played a very strong Michigan team, and we basically squeaked out a win to get into the finals. The second part of the memory was playing the finals against South Carolina. A lot of our good friends from the New York area played on that team. Brian Winters, Kevin Joyce, to name two. Again, a very strong team, very deep team with talent, and we went on to beat them as well. So that was a terrific tournament for us, and I think we surprised a lot of people that we pulled it out.
Schaefer averaged nearly 25 points a game that year. Only a point lost to Penn in the NCAA tournament end of the season, and closed Molzoff's coaching stint at St. John's. He stepped down after a successful 3 seasons that included trips to the postseason each year. A familiar face filled the vacancy. Luke Carnesecca decided to come home after 3 years of professional basketball, and he brought back with him the St. John's philosophy and sense of tradition that he had picked up as a student under Frank McGuire and Joe Lapchick.
And the philosophy was always the St. John's philosophy, which was, of course, then Coach Lapchick, again, take good care of the ball, play for the good shot, and play good solid defense, be it man-to-man or zone. But also, these men had something very, very important. They never forgot that kids are playing for you, and never to embarrass them, never to put them in a situation which would cause them to feel poorly. So to them, I'm certainly very much indebted. And even going back to Buck Freeman, who probably was the guy who really pushed St. John's on the map. He had a great philosophy, one of the great teachers, who probably was 20 years ahead of his time. So we had some great, great teachers. So I was very lucky.
Carnesecca's return season was a good one. The Redmen won 20 games in the 1973-74 season and wouldn't drop below that watermark for the next 6 years. George Johnson led St. John's to a ton of victories during the school's productive mid-70s run. But the mightiest rebounder in Redmen history moved on before the unforgettable 1978-79 season. Carnesecca's squad was stacked that year with talented players like Reggie Carter and Wayne McCoy. But things didn't start off too well.
I think we were 9-8. We were scratching our head. We were losing ball games on the last shot, though. The opponents had hit a jump shot with time running out, or we'd blow a foul shot at the end. We were 9-8. And we didn't know where the next game of victory was going to come from. Lord and behold, we wind up winning the next 13 out of 15. And we just missed by 2 points, going to the Final Four.
The Redmen received the final bid given to the NCAA's Big Dance. They knocked out Temple in the opener and shocked second seed Duke in the second round. Rutgers fell next, and suddenly only Penn could keep the Redmen from the Final Four. But Louis' kids lost in a heartbreaker, 64-62.
It was a run that you kept saying to yourself, we can't do it, but we'll go as far as we can. We can't do it. Hey, yeah. But I'll tell you one thing, it was nice to beat Rutgers. It's always good to beat Rutgers, so we finally took over. So, that was a good shot, a very, very good shot. And it just shows to go when you get it all together, you know. It wasn't one of our better teams, but it made a lot of mileage,
The new decade began with a new era for Redmen hoops. After 72 years of independence, St. John's began to play in the Big East Conference.
I can remember Dave Gavitt. It was Jack Kaiser again, Frank Rienzo. I, in the beginning, was not, too hot about the idea. And it was from a selfish point of view. We had done well. We always went to a tournament. Well, why should we play these fellas twice when we already played them once. But I think, in retrospective, probably the greatest move that we did was to go into that league.
The 1980 Redmen rolled through January and into February, building a 17-game winning streak. St. John's managed a 5-1 league record to take a share of their first Big East regular season title. Then in the fall of '81, St. John's introduced a sharpshooting kid from Brooklyn named Chris Mullen.
When the pressure is on you, when the fire is at its highest, when it calls for that last dram of courage to make the offensive move that can cost you the ball game, Chris Mullen wanted the ball. And that's a quality that only the great ones have.
Every time out there, it was a sonata. He could play so well. Just to watch him was so good. See, the good ones do things for themselves. The great ones, and he was great, are able to do things for others. And he had that gift. When he stepped on the other court, people around him automatically better.
Mullen and David Russell led St. John's to a solid finish in '82, but even better times were on the horizon. Mullen reached the 1,000-point landmark his sophomore year after only 58 games in the red and white. But this team had much more to offer than one star. Both David Russell and Billy Goodwin dropped in their 1,000th points during the '83 campaign as well. For the first time, the Big East tournament was held at Madison Square Garden. And after defeating Boston College in the final, the league tournament crown belonged to St. John's for the first time. Mullen was named the most valuable player. For a city kid, there was no greater honor than playing well at the Garden.
Place where growing up, if you got there, you made it. It's kind of like going to St. Patrick's Cathedral. It's the best, playing. Coach always used to say, hey, when we play at the Garden, you're playing in Mace's window. So everybody knows what's going to happen. So, that's how he used to get us to practice harder and get out there by yourself. Say, hey, we're playing in the Garden next week. So you better get out there and practice now because you don't want to go out there and stink it up.
The Redmen finished with a 28-5 record and a number 3 ranking in both the AP and UPI final polls. Louis was voted Coach of the Year in the Big East and also by the U.S. Basketball Writers and the National Association of Basketball Coaches. Mullen was tabbed Player of the Year in the Big East. But as he headed into the '83-'84 season without 3 starters from the year before, Carnesecca had some rebuilding to do. Luckily, that was also the year Louis welcomed freshmen Mark Jackson and Willie Glass to Jamaica. Carnesecca became the school's all-time winningest coach on February 11th. The win over UConn put him over the top with 335 wins. 10 days later, Louis' Redmen would shock the nearly invincible Georgetown Hoyas 75-71 at the Capitol Center. It was the last loss for Georgetown in their national championship season, and it was the beginning of an epic series between the two schools. It all fed into the Big East mystique. Through the mid-'80s, the conference reigned supreme, and everybody knew it.
They were great times for St. John's. Great rivalries for us, and, as well as Georgetown, St. John's, Syracuse, St. John's rivalries in the start of the Big East. College basketball was at its finest hour as far as the Big East was concerned during that era.
The talent was in place to make 1985 a season to remember, and expectations were sky high. The pressure was on to make it to the Final Four.
I'm not going to say that I wasn't nervous. I thought about that because I knew we had a good club. Everybody knew we had a good club. And I think everybody pointed to that.
Now we had guys coming back who played big minutes. Walter Berry was eligible now from junior college. Mark Jackson had another year of experience. Bill Wellington was playing a lot better. So we were deeper and talented.
Mullen quickly passed Bob Zawalek as the all-time leading scorer in St. John's history. But things got really interesting when in mid-January, Lou Carnesecca caught a cold.
An Italian coach, Mr. Messina, came over here, and it's the custom that we exchange gifts. He gave me 2 sweaters, 2 ugly sweaters, So I went home and threw them in the closet. Okay, it's now January, and I had a bad cold. So Mary, my wife, says, look, the gym's a little drafty. Why don't you wear a sweater? So I said, I don't want to wear a sweater. So I got a good husband. I listened. Went into the closet, took this ugly sweater, and I get out to Pittsburgh, and I put this thing on. But it was really ugly. Nobody could describe it. Didn't have any composition. It was just a wild one, you know? Chris Mullin hits a jump shot. We win the ball game, and now I got to win. Now I got to wear that sweater. The sweater won the ball game.
The sweater stayed, and the winning streak kept growing. On January 26, 1985, St. John's edged the top-ranked Georgetown Hoyas by a score of 66-65. And when the fresh set of national polls were released, St. John's was the #1 team in the land.
And if I didn't wear the sweater, the kids would come and say, where's your sweater, coach? So it became a cause célèbre. I had to wear that sweater. Didn't help me too long, but we got a few wins out of it. But the wonderful thing about that, even to this day, if I meet 10 people, 8 people ask me, where's your sweater? Here I thought I was a great tactician, a great strategist. The sweater won all the ball game. Can you imagine that?
For more than a month, the Redmen fought off all challenges, and the winning streak kept growing. But Patrick Ewing and the Hoyas were next, ranked #2 now and trying to get back to the top spot. The game was going to be in the Garden, and all of New York was talking about it.
The fans were alive, the city was alive, it was Redmen basketball.
The Garden, when we played Georgetown, I think the spirit and the electricity that was in New York was unbelievable. I mean, tickets were, you know, scalpers had a field day. But it was a great, great feeling if you were basketball. The games were unbelievable.
You know, we just hated Georgetown. And, you know, I don't think I spoke a word to Patrick in 4 years. And if I did, I couldn't say what they were.
This time, Georgetown coach John Thompson was ready.
Just before the game starts, that, you know, we usually shake hands. And John comes up, and he's got his jacket, you know, but it's closed up. What's wrong with him? Has he got a cold? All of a sudden, he opens it up, and he's got a replica of my sweater. I mean, really, you know, he really upstaged me. Now, I didn't mind that, but when he beat me in the game, that really hurt.
The Hoyas exacted their revenge, 85-69. But that was the only blemish on St. John's conference slate. The Redmen clinched the Big East regular season title with a 15-1 record. Both St. John's and Georgetown powered their way to the finals of the Big East tournament. The Hoyas prevailed again, but it wasn't their last meeting that year. Putting that setback behind them, St. John's began its march to the Final Four madness. After victories over Southern University and Arkansas, Kentucky awaited at the West Regional in Denver. St. John's survived a nip-and-tuck first half and then pulled away in the final 20 minutes to get the 86-70 win. Then on March 24th, the Redmen downed Jim Valdano's North Carolina State Wolfpack 69-60 to earn a trip to the Final Four for the first time since 1952. And nobody was happier than Louis.
Don't really know how much longer he was going to coach, and you don't always want to look to another year. And I think, I remember when we won, I think we won in Denver, he came up, he said, we're going, baby, we're going. You know, he was so happy, and it was a good feeling.
A great thrill, great relief, great thrill. Sense of satisfaction, yes. Proud, yes. There were so many good things. These kids finally got us back to where we wanted to go and be, because that's it. When you get to the Final Four, that's a great thing.
The Final Four was a near replay of the Big East tournament, with St. John's, Villanova, and Georgetown all advancing to Lexington, Kentucky. But for the Redmen, March Madness turned truly maddening in the Final Four. Georgetown did it again, knocking out St. John's in the semis, before Villanova captured the upset of the century in the championship game. The Redmen had played the awesome Hoyas 4 times, and Georgetown had won 3 of them.
Yes, it would have been great to win it all, but not everybody can be president.
Chris Mullin finished his career as the school's all-time leading scorer with 2,440 points. And he left with an arena full of All-America accolades and Player of the Year awards, including the John Wooden Award. Mullen and Bill Wennington would be sorely missed the next season, but the Redmen were still in capable hands. This was Walter Berry's show now, with support coming from assist specialist Mark Jackson.
When you talk about Mark Jackson, probably next to Dick McGuire, probably the greatest point guard we ever had here. They were totally unselfish. They were totally dedicated to make the other guy look good. Totally.
By the end of the 85-86 regular season, the Johnnies had laid claim to a share of the Big East title. And the conference tournament belonged to the Redmen as well. In the final against Syracuse, St. John's trailed by 11 at the half, but Ron Rowan's late jumper triggered a fantastic finish. Walter Berry stuffed Pearl Washington's layup try to preserve the 70-69 victory and the school's second tourney championship. St. John's finished fourth in both the final national rankings, and Walter Berry finished with a single-season record 828 points. He was showered with every version of National Player of the Year award available, including the John Wooden Award. It was the second straight year the honor went to a St. John's man.
I thought Walter was going to average 50 points a game. He was unstoppable. He'd take that left hand to go up here, hand to try to block it, run it here. He still can't stop it.
With a blue-collar banger named Matt Brush joining Jackson and Willie Glass for the 86-87 campaign, the Redmen easily continue their winning ways. And Mark Jackson closed out his brilliant career as a consensus second-team All-American and the Big East Defensive Player of the Year. At the start of the 1988-89 campaign, Coach Carnesecca welcomed one of the greatest freshman classes ever at St. John's. Robert Wardan, Malik Sealy, and Jason Buchanan came in the nick of time. With so young a team, the Redmen finished the regular season 15-13. The NIT was interested, however, and Louis accepted the invitation. Posting a 76-65 win over Alabama Birmingham in the semis, only St. Louis stood between the Redmen and their fifth NIT title. MVP Jason Williams and a fantastic freshman class took the crown with a 73-65 win. 1989-90 was another successful season. Boo Harvey and Malik Sealy stepped to the front and led St. John's to 24 wins.
Malik probably maybe the fastest guy we ever had here at St. John's. He could get down the court quicker than anybody I've ever seen. He could have been they could have been Olympian in track. He was so quick. Another guy, again, a formula, tremendous worker. Would get here, he still getting here before practice, after practice, working on things. Off season, you always find him in the laboratory.
All Harvey did during the 89-90 season was hit 4 last-second buzzer-beating shots to either win a game or send it into overtime. Louis picked up his 500th victory against Seton Hall on February 2nd, 1991. But the 1990-91 team was saving its best for last. In the NCAA tournament, the Redmen beat Northern Illinois and Texas in the first 2 rounds. The highly ranked Ohio State Buckeyes awaited in the Mid-East Regional. But this time it would be the Johnnies doing the spoiling. They won in a shocker, 91-74. But Duke loomed in the regional final. The Blue Devils continued their rampage to a national title, and St. John's finished just 1 game short of the Final Four. Despite landing in a 3-way tie for the conference championship in 1992, the season's true highlight came January 31st when Lou Carnesecca was elected to the Basketball Hall of Fame. Louis' crowning year would also be his last.
I think you've heard me say many times that it would be very difficult for me to put the ball down. But I think the time has come now. And why? 2 very simple reasons. Number 1, I still have half of my marbles. And number 2, I still have a wonderful taste in my mouth about basketball.
He retired at the close of the 92 campaign with a 526-200 record to show for his 24 years of loyal service to St. John's. Louis took his Redmen to postseason play every one of those 24 seasons.
I think I was completely burnt out. I mean, after 42 years, I just couldn't go anymore. I was completely worn out. And the second thing, I wanted to leave with a good taste. Many times in this profession, you're asked to leave when you don't want to leave. I was very fortunate that I was able at least to pick the time where I felt it was time for me to go.
Louis' legacy is a great one.
He was not afraid to challenge you, but he was right behind you as well. You know, as long as you gave the effort, he was willing to shoulder the burden. You know, never once did he put that on his players. When it was a loss, he took the loss. When it was a win, he gave it to us. And that's the way he is.
The following season, Brian Mahoney stepped up to take the reins of the St. John's program after 16 years as Carnesecca's right-hand man.
Being with him for all those years, and again, 16 years as an assistant coach, I learned just about an awful lot. And even more so, the X's and O's, I think I learned that the way he treated people, and I think that was one of the great reasons so many people feel good about when they hear Lou Carnesecca, they have a smile comes to their face.
Mahoney's first season would be no easy project. Picked to finish 9th in the league, his first Redmen squad finished a surprising 2nd in the Big East. David Kane emerged from the sidelines to lead his team to an unexpected berth in the NCAAs, and Mahoney was named Big East Coach of the Year. More important, it became apparent that the great St. John's tradition was in good hands. Before the 94-95 season, the team got a new name, the Red Storm. And St. John's also got one of the nation's best recruiting classes, including Felipe Lopez.
But anyway, let's get to where we have come. I believe
With a highly touted class of freshmen and enthusiastic fan support like always, Alumni Hall was packed to the rafters for the school's first ever Midnight Madness.
I know the committee here did a great job, and they got the students excited about it, and it was a great night. It was a fun night.
And while the 94 and 95 teams didn't reach the level people hoped, the tradition of success and the high expectations for the program have never diminished. When fans think about St. John's, they think of a winner.
I think they should think of quality. I think they should think of a dignified, clean program that gains excellence while playing within the rules. I think that's very, very important. I think they should also think of the great tradition of coaches like Lapchick, like McGuire, like Buck Freeman, like Lou Carnesecca, and hopefully in a few years, Brian Mahoney.
They've given us so much grand entertainment, a lot of laughs, a lot of thrills, a lot of high spots, a lot of low spots, but the low spots were what made the high spots so great. No, I think St. John's basketball will continue. We are among the winning teams. I don't know just what the standing is, but we're in the top 5 of the winning percentage, and we're in the top 5 of the total victories, and we'll stay there. And the others will have to come and knock us off.
Coach after great coach, player after great player, legend after great legend. The St. John's basketball tradition has survived and thrived, but its history is a volume that's far from finished. Each year a new squad strives to make its mark with another winning season, another record for the books, another championship. Who will be the next Hall of Famer to wear the red and white? Who will capture the next title? You won't have to wait long to find out.